and let us all do we can to build a better future.
And it's a continuing fallout of the infamous laptop. Laptop that corporate media said was fake news. Fake news. Remember, in 2020, the New York Post was censored on Twitter and on Facebook about sharing that article. And any one of you, in fact, if you just go back in time, if you look at all the posts there, especially when it came down to sharing that article from the New York Post, you couldn't do it on your Facebook account and you couldn't share it on your Twitter account. So it says a lot about this entire system that we are in, and I think it's very important to shine a light on the hypocrisy that is corporate media. So first, let's check out this segment here. We have Tucker Carlson interviewing Glenn Greenwald. Let's play it in its full entirety.
How do you assess this, Glenn? You've been on this story since day one. Pull the threads together for us, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, the entire liberal wing of the corporate media, which is basically the entire corporate media with a few exceptions, spent a year and a half now disseminating a CIA lie, which is that the Hunter laptop emails published by the Washington Post were quote-unquote Russian disinformation. Amazingly, the letter from those intelligence officials, the dozens of them, on which they relied, did not even say that. They admitted, those officials did, that they have no evidence for making this claim and have no reason to believe it except this kind of like tingling sensation in their stomach that gives them like an intuitive sense that maybe it's the Russians. And the media went even further than the trained liars in the intelligence community and said it is Russian disinformation. There has been evidence, as you know, from the very beginning proving that this laptop was completely authentic. I was willing to stake my entire journalistic reputation by writing about it, but was censored by my own media outlet and quit in protest over it. But the evidence has long been there. The New York Times, I have to say, is one of the very few outlets that didn't affirm this. They did acknowledge early on in a very kind of understated way that there was no evidence for it. But now they've come out and said, we, the New York Times, have been able to authenticate these materials. I think it's because somebody is leaking to them information about what is the pending and very broad ongoing FBI criminal investigation into Hunter Biden, and to report on it, they needed to use materials from the archive, and to do that, they needed to authenticate it, so they had an interest in doing so now, whereas I guess a year and a half ago, right before the election, to debunk the lies being told, they didn't.
Yeah, you wonder if it's, and I don't want to go conspiracy nut on the air or anything, but you wonder if it's part of some broader effort to get Biden out. Your mind does go there, I will say. Just want to say that. Glenn Greenwald, thank you for your ongoing ceaseless fight against censorship. Appreciate it.
So let's actually talk about this. When it comes down to the Biden administration, this isn't the first time we've heard conversations, especially from Democratic insiders or other pundits, really questioning the strengths of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, especially Joe Biden himself, as we have shown on this show numerous times, as have numerous other independent media networks have shown. Biden has been stuttering, stammering, and, well, his behavior has always been questionable, but it borderlines on either he's getting early onset dementia or has Alzheimer's. No matter which way you want to paint it, it's quite clear that Democratic voters and a lot of Democratic insiders and key power players are rather disappointed in regards to how the Biden-Harris administration is playing out. And maybe this is some kind of attempt to get him out of the way for the next presidential election cycle, which will take place in 2024. And on last week's show, especially on Friday, we talked about potential contenders for the Democratic primary, be it a Ro Khanna, which is a joke upon itself, Joe Manchin, Kamala Harris potentially, Hillary Clinton. That would be a huge dread. But again, with this scandal that's coming out, I think it's very important that we look at how much corporate media bent over backwards to deny the existence or the potential threat that this laptop would pose towards the Biden-Harris administration. But now all of corporate media is talking about it. Let's play up this next video, though, because, again, it's another segment from Fox, but it does call into question, really, what does this mean? Because the fallout is still ongoing. Let's play it.
And Howie, the Hunter Biden laptop, New York Times comes out and says, hey, it's legit after all. Facebook was going to do a fact check, never did it. Twitter never happened. And you think nobody has apologized at all for this. They were wrong across the media. won, and nobody has said, you know what, we screwed that up. It wasn't Russian disinformation.
No, but I think there's a larger context here, which is that what was this about? What does it prove? Nobody said it wasn't true. That what was said was that you can't authenticate it, and then you had certain publications that said we have authenticated.
The analyst, the Intel analyst said they couldn't prove it. It sure looked like Russian disinformation.
Right, couldn't prove it was the key point for organizations.
It is an absolute embarrassment that the way that the media downplayed or ignored or mocked or minimized this story that the New York Times now says is under active federal investigation for possible tax violations or lobbying violations by the president's son. And they're still not covering it. None of the other networks have touched this story. It doesn't mean that Hunter Biden's going to be indicted. It may or may not have a political fallout for his father. But when you look back at the way Facebook, Twitter, for example, said, well, you can't even share this information from the New York Post.
This was in the middle of a heated political campaign intended to damage one candidate in the aftermath of Russian disinformation.
Let's pause it right here. Let's pause right here, because obviously we only got a few more seconds left in the video anyways. But this is important. In the 2020 presidential election cycle, where there was then candidate Biden against former President Donald Trump, corporate media circled wagons around the Biden-Harris campaign and was making sure that this entire story posted by the New York Post would be swept under the rug. The New York Times, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, and all of corporate media rallied around the fact that this could have been Russian disinformation. Now, the thing is, this really should tell all of you just how inept, weak, and out of touch our establishment media truly is. This isn't the first time corporate media has lied about a story or misrepresented the story as a whole. Take, for example, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Before the invasion of Iraq, all of corporate media was singing the same tune, that there were nuclear, biological, and chemical weapon facilities in Iraq, and that they were an immediate threat to the United States and its allies. But when the invasion happened, nothing happened. No WMDs were used. No weapons of mass destruction facilities were found. Nothing was found at all. The war was based on a lie, and corporate media was acting like cheerleaders for the Bush-Cheney administration. This is a fact, and countless lives were devastated by that ridiculous war. And it should have been the media's job to challenge the Bush-Cheney administration with this ridiculous invasion that happened. We are still dealing with the fallout from that war. And now here we are in the year 2022. And it turns out a story that was published during the presidential election cycle of 2020. Turns out that story was true. This is why we need to have independent media and not have it at risk of being censored or suppressed by outlets like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank goodness there's platforms like Rockfin and Odyssey that do respect free-thinking media and free speech. But see, every time you challenge against the neoliberal narrative from corporate media, they're quick to silence you, and big tech is on board, and so is a two-party system. Anyone that challenges the narrative or story, they're deemed conspiracy theorists. They're deemed as not reliable. Hey, YouTube, what will be your policy towards all those media outlets on your platform that were once promoting the fact that that article from the New York Post was fake news? Now it's been proven true. Will CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, or any other outlet be held accountable for their actions, for not doing their due diligence? From that Fox News clip from Case Study QB that he posted on his Twitter page, again, be sure to support Case Study QB on all of his accounts. The fact checkers got it wrong. The authoritative sources got it wrong. And we cannot forget this. At this point in time, I know everyone is overwhelmed with social media and all the stories that are happening, but we cannot forget this other example of how corporate media got the facts wrong. Now, I know what a lot of people would probably say. Well, let's say the story was actually fully released and actually made an impact in 2020. It could have potentially helped Trump. No matter who's sitting in the White House, nothing has fundamentally changed. You see, the Democratic and Republican parties are basically putting on a song and dance show for us all. They're friends with each other. The same people who own our politicians are the same people that control the media. And the media has its narrative. They have their marching orders from their owners. That's the truth. And the sooner more Americans realize it, the better we are at actually establishing a real movement and organizations outside the sphere of influence from that swamp bubble called Washington, D.C. We have to be better than that. I want to pull up this article from the Post Millennial. It came out yesterday where Joe Rogan, I know, another person who has been smeared by corporate media, calls out the hypocrisy of the New York Times and all the other media outlets that were trying to cover up the Hunter Biden laptop story. So, podcasting icon Joe Rogan slammed the corporate media's coverage of Hunter Biden's laptop saga on Saturday's episode of his popular show featuring former CIA covert operations officer Mike Baker, the current CEO of global intelligence firm. In the program segment, Baker noted the legacy media loved a good story. They don't just love a good story, they love a narrative, and they're willing to ignore facts to push that narrative. That's what scares me, Rogan said. Continuing on, Rogan noted he believes there are objective journalists who work for the Washington Post and New York Times. There's a real solid journalist out there, Rogan acknowledged, but I don't necessarily know if you're getting all the information. He continued, causing Baker to laugh out loud in laughter. You're not sure, Baker asked Rogan sarcastically. I think it's safe to say that some fuckery is afoot. Why not? Let's give a middle finger to censorship after all. The New York Times just now is admitting that the Hunter Biden laptop is real. And remember from the debates with Trump bringing it up to Biden and Biden saying it's BS. It's a lie, flat out lie. Everybody knew it was a lie. Rogan went on to referring to when the New York Post bombshell report, infamous laptop from hell, was suppressed on Twitter in October of 2020. Rogan said the censorship was just outright crazy, mentioning that the conservative news outlet is one of the oldest newspapers in the country. And this isn't the first time we've seen censorship. Again, quite recently, for 7 days, The Hill, or Rising, the show that's associated with The Hill, was suspended from uploading any content on YouTube. I know everyone's in this elated rush, especially from the Vote Blue No Matter Who crowd, now that RT and Sputnik are off European and North American radars right now at this point. But censorship is starting to get out of control. And this is the problem with censorship, because when you censor a story, especially one like the New York Post story about the laptop from Hunter Biden is true, what corporate media, legacy media is showing all of us is that they cannot be trusted. They're not reliable sources. And you know, there's a whole bunch of great independent media content creators out there that are actually sifting through the lies from corporate media. When we play these clips from Case Study QB, it's not there to promote them. It's actually to filter out the lie and call out these pundits and these corporate politicians for the hypocrites that they are. In this day and age right now where there is so much suppression, so much misinformation, so much censorship, it is important that we have real independent media out there. We need to have real journalists out there that are not beholden to corporate donors. Every election has consequences. Everything that we do right now at this point will make an impact for the next year. These stories play a role in our lives, and we have to hold those in power accountable. And here's something that I can predict seeing happening. From this story that just, again, down at the New York Times has acknowledged that the Hunter Biden laptop that was first posted by the New York Post is real, it's going to be used as political ammunition for this midterm election cycle and for 2024. But let's also look at real journalists. Take, for example, Glenn Greenwald. He was silenced by The Intercept, an outlet that he helped found. Turns out that story was real too. Will The Intercept apologize to Glenn Greenwald? Will they acknowledge that he was right, as he's been right about a lot of stories? Probably not. They won't do it. Because The Intercept has its own narrative and they're too prideful. But at this point in time, every one of us should be angry. We should be furious at the fact that we've been lied to. We've been denied real chances to actually bring in real accountability. And now more than ever, we have to break away from the systems that are trying to dictate to us what we can think and what we can feel. And when we do this show here for Hard Lens Media, I have to have full trust, not only in my team here, but into the audience as well. Because the information we give you, it is up to you to make your own decision. I will not tell you what to think or what to feel. You have to make that decision on your own. And that goes the same thing for any other media that you consume. Point is, we need to see different perspectives, different points of view. Make the decision for yourselves on what is truth and what is false. And with a story like this right now, all of us must redouble our efforts to filter through the lies, the neoliberal lies that are being presented to us from corporate media, so that we can actually get to the real facts. It's up to us. That's why I say in this show, I want to see more citizen journalists on this across the country. I want to see more people stepping up because it's needed. This isn't a debate anymore. This isn't an idea. It's a fact. Citizen journalists are needed in this country. It's up to us, not MSNBC or CNN or Fox News. They've lied to us enough.